Welcome back to the Respect the Drive podcast. I'm Tedward, and like any great podcast, this starts off with an apology. I'm so sorry. I have not been producing these podcasts with the frequency that I intended. The last one came out at the end of February. We are almost, well, I guess when this airs, this is June. It's June. It's been a little while, but I hope you can appreciate that I dedicated my resources, the Tedward resources, which is just me, to the channel. And we've got a lot of great cars going on. We've got a lot of great videos happening because more and more oddball cars are coming out of the woodwork, and generous owners are tossing me the keys. But you know, it means I've been neglecting my own cars. And thankfully, they're not neglected because the M5, my E39 M5 with 79,000 miles, is up at Garage 42. And since we last spoke, Craft Detailing, the people who paint corrected and opti-coated the ceramic coating on my M3, they opened shop up in Woburn at Garage 42. They've actually taken over that delivery bay, which is now a wash bay. I guess it was always intended to be a wash bay, but now they're washing and detailing and correcting cars up there. So my guy Kevin at Craft Detailing, he's been working up at Garage 42 on and off because, you know, he's back in Dedham as well because they've got both stores. But he sees my M5. He sees my M5 and he sends me an angry text. He just says, "This should be taken away from you. If there was DSS for cars, I would have this removed from your possession. I would have this in foster care." And he's not wrong. The paint on my M5, I mean, mechanically the car is okay. You know, I do take reasonably good care of it, but my goodness, the paint on that car, I've never really done anything to it because although I'm only the second owner, I think the first owner was one of those guys who would just take it to car washes, let it do its thing. He's probably letting the BMW dealership just take like wheel brushes to the thing. You know, when you go for an oil change at a dealership and they just do a terrible job washing your car, they're like, "Look, it's shiny." It's like, yeah, great. You introduced every swirl possible into this car. Anyway, if you look at the Craft Detailing Instagram page, I think they put a picture of it and they said, "This is an M5 where the swirls have swirls." So he took it upon himself. He goes, "I can't look at this anymore." They've paint corrected the car. We still have to opti-coat it. I haven't taken it out yet. I haven't seen it finished in person, but I did see like a 50-50 because he did me a favor and he paint corrected half of the car so I could see how bad it was, which was a benefit for both video and for him to go, "Look at what you did. Look at what you did and look at what I did." So anyway, huge thanks to Craft Detailing up at Garage 42. But today, we have a phenomenal guest. We have Tim McGrane. This may not be a household name for you, Tim McGrane, but Tim McGrane is the former CEO of WeatherTech Laguna Seca Raceway. This is like the real deal. He also was in the leadership position up at the Black Hawk Museum in Northern California, and now he's just taken over as CEO of M1 Concourse in Pontiac, Michigan. Now, you may not know what M1 Concourse is. If you're a Jackie Ding fan, you definitely know M1 Concourse because that's where he wrecked a Supra, airbags and everything. But M1 Concourse is a great little track. It's not a racetrack. It's more like a test track. It's not somewhere where we're gonna go like 2-3 cars wide passing each other. But it's a great place to go experience a car. It's a small, like intimate kind of track, but they sell garage space. They sell basically like clubhouses for car enthusiasts. So whether you're like storing a couple of cars or like a full-blown collection that you want to be able to share with everybody, open the big garage doors and have little gatherings and all that kind of, that's what this place is about. It's a great little gated community for car enthusiasts. So I'll let him explain, but what I like about this interview is that we're talking to somebody who's like a businessman with a passion for cars who's showing us kind of what the future of the automotive world will be like for enthusiasts. Because remember, we're all doom and gloom here right now, right? We're talking about EVs. Everything's going away. Oh, we're never going to have it like we used to. Well, there's still dudes like this who are coming in, basically investing in the future of preserving what we love. So let's go talk to Tim. Tim isn't our typical car enthusiast. Tim is a businessman car enthusiast who's kind of living the CEO dream that we all wish we could do. You are the CEO of M1 Concourse right now out in Pontiac, Michigan, which, I mean, you've got a racetrack.
We do. Well, actually, it's more classified as a high-performance driving experience track. The track was designed, it's 1.5 miles, 11 turns. It was not designed for wheel-to-wheel competition. You can certainly compete against the clock. But again, so I say that's why we classify it as a sort of a high performance driving track.
And for those who have not seen the venue, I've driven by it. I've gone up to the gate. The code changed, so I never I never went in. But it's right off the road. I mean, it's really a fascinating location because it's so central to where I think a lot of people in the area, in the greater Detroit metro area, live. I mean, it's if you owned cars and you wanted the ideal storage facility to keep your vehicles safe, sound, and near other enthusiasts who are going to respect your stuff, it doesn't get any better than this place.
Well, we certainly think so. I mean, we're fortunate to be where we are. We're right on Woodward Avenue. We're right on the south part of the city of Pontiac, where Pontiac and Bloomfield Hills joins. And this particular property is historically referred to as the Triangle, and that's what we almost are. We're bordered on, by roads on three sides. Woodward Avenue, South Bullard, and Franklin, and then the railroad on the other side. And they actually have been making vehicles of some description since about 1902, 1903 on this piece of property. For the longest period of time, it was the GMC assembly plant for a combination of commercial vehicles. I think probably the most iconic one that was made here was the infamous sort of six-wheel motorhomes from the 70s. That sort of we all know and loved in the day, and then they became forgotten, and now they've become very much desirable. That originally started, actually my office sits on the property that was the land of the original Rapid Motor Car Company back in the early 20th century, and it was named after the street behind us, which is actually called Rapid Street.
That's quite a bit more pedigree than I was in Los Angeles 2 weeks ago, and we went to the Porsche Experience Center, which is literally built on a dump.
Well, I tell you what, when the GMC shuttered this place, when they went through that sort of downturn in their business, I think there was a period of time where this property probably would have fitted that description.
I mean, it's nice to see it end up in, from my point of view, the right hands. I've gotten a glimpse into the facility here and there just from either YouTube videos and some friends who work some of the thrill rides. I have a friend, Chris Amos, the Topher on YouTube. He's one of the thrill ride drivers out in the Hellcats. Someone has a wedding or an event. I guess pre-COVID, we're on our way back to it now. But I find this fascinating that people, especially in Detroit, there's such a culture around cars that's ingrained in that city that you don't have to be a special enthusiast. Like any kind of company, I think, could have an outing at this location in Detroit, and it wouldn't be odd.
Yes, we are fortunate. So we have a bit of a sort of a private and then a public identity. The private side is we have 250 privately owned garages, whereas as you previously mentioned, people can keep their car collections. They also create somewhat of I wouldn't say a car guy's paradise because we have some lady owners, but they go from one extreme. Some people have got their race cars, they've got a lift, they've got the obligatory refrigerator that they can keep their beer cold, and their toolbox. And then others are the extreme case of sort of the Taj Mahal for automotive. People are passionate about the automotive and spectacular places, almost to the point where you sort of step inside and you look outside and you go, did I go through a time warp or something? Because these places are mind-blowing. And then our public identity is the events that we do, both the large major events we have coming up, and like a lot of places around the country, we're going to start kicking off our Cars and Coffee season. And then we have people that rent the facility, rent the track for events, which they have the opportunity to have the thrill rides or hot laps included.
It's fascinating that there's this location where people can, and I feel like I'm just advertising for it right now, but the reality for me is any of the collections that I've seen kind of in the Boston area, for the most part, they're not located at people's homes. They're in what from the outside look like very unsuspecting, almost dingy warehouses. And then you enter there and there's maybe $30 million worth of rare Italian metal and Pininfarina and Bertoni coachwork, all this crazy stuff. And the only time you would be able to enjoy that with a group of people is if you were to have invited that group of people. To me, I love the idea. This almost seems like a freshman college dormitory version of the car enthusiast, where you can roll into your place, open the door, and there's probably going to be your neighbor hanging out with his door open too. Especially on a weekend, you can have that camaraderie with people, like-minded folks who are just hanging out doing their thing. That to me is really what I like about it, because the pressure seems off of the social situation. It's just available. It's part of the gig.
No, you're exactly right. We have that a lot of times, and like this evening, we have track days for our motorsports club members, and they just finished about 30 minutes ago, and I suspect there's a whole group of them gathering, outside or inside, one of the garages, just sort of hanging out. Most of the owners of our garages live within about 30 minutes of where we are. So, for them to just say, I'm going to go over to M1, and when they get over here, find there's, 10 people or 50 people, all hanging out here, either on track or just, in their garages, doing whatever they do. So we've got a very active social group of owners, which I think that certainly makes enjoying what we have here, or the people who enjoy their garage, to have a nice garage and nice cars, but not necessarily be able to share it, with other people or enjoy that camaraderie. I think that's one thing that's a big plus for where we are, because we are so centrally located in a metropolitan area.
So for you, you've walked into this as, now as the CEO, you kind of have to have this businessman's vision of what goes on and what improves, what changes, what's the future of this. What does that look like for you? What did M1 Concourse lack? And for those, I can already see the emails they're saying it's not Concourse. Well, it is Concourse. It is spelled like Concourse. So I figure we'll hit that one now before I have to reply to those. But what do you see this becoming? How do you envision this, especially going forward in a time where everyone seems so uncertain and very apocalyptic about the motor car, especially the way we think of automotive enthusiasm?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that when I joined M1 and I took over the position of CEO March 1st, already on the schedule was our Woodward Dream Show, which actually was an event that planned last year, but unfortunately got postponed, like the rest of every event calendar in the world, and American Speed Festival, which we're doing. So those two events were already scheduled. What we're looking to do is to take these events and make them, not large events, because we're not a large facility. We sit on 87 acres, so there's only so much we can do, and maybe in today's world, smaller, intimate or more bespoke events are the way to go. But we're creating, the Woodward Dream Show is very much a car event, because it's the same time as a Woodward Dream Cruise, and we sit right on M1, which is the designation for Woodward Avenue, Michigan Highway 1. So that very much is going to be a tribute to the cars that made Woodward Avenue the legacy that it is as a car event, but also today's contemporary. So it could be anything from, the cars that ran on Woodward Avenue in the 60s and 70s, up to nowadays, maybe a car that's a Riddler Award winner, or America's Most Beautiful Roadster winner, or any of the SEMA award-winning cars that you wouldn't potentially see on the street because of either the owner's concerns or the value, or they're just not comfortable doing that. But we're providing a controlled environment, a venue where they can be displayed as part of an event, because the owners still like to share the cars, and obviously it gives spectators or attendees are possible to sort of see the cars up close.
Did you find this part of, let me rephrase that. Did you find that this culture, this part of the country, was a little foreign at first? I know that you've spent most of your time, I did a little research, you spent most of your time on the West Coast in kind of Northern California. You ran Laguna Seca Raceway, which is absolutely, that's a heck of a bullet on your resume, sir. That is a different world. California is what the world looks to for what we consider car culture, right? You're either in the northern Italy in the Swiss Alps or Monaco, or you're in California. So for you, what was it like moving to Detroit? I mean, that's a big jump from what we see out west.
It is, and you're certainly right about California, specifically Southern California. I've been fortunate. I've lived a couple of times in Southern California, was in Northern California a couple of times, and then over to Arizona. The cars that are in Southern California, or actually even in Northern California, there's certainly a great car culture out there. It's very much that sort of the sun and sand and sea lifestyle. The collectors out there that have some of those legendary, European sports and race cars from the 50s and 60s, and then the modern day contemporary cars, because the climate allows you to have that. In some cases the roads do. The traffic certainly hinders, your ability to enjoy them. I can vouch for that.
But even back in the 50s, I mean, Max Hoffman was the guy cultivating what Porsche was going to sell to the American market. I mean, it's pretty outrageous.
No, very much so. There's certainly a tremendous car culture here in the Detroit area. It's I wouldn't say very much focused, because I've got to experience a sort of a full season to see what fully comes out of sort of winter hibernation, which is obviously one thing you don't have to worry about in California. You can have your cars out all year round. But American muscle cars and hot rods. I've certainly met a number of people who've got European sports cars, but the sheer numbers of American cars make this very much targeted towards that world. But I think actually I saw a fact somewhere that I think actually there are more classic cars or car collectors in the state of Michigan than most other places. The concentration of cars in this part of the world is probably one of the highest. I know the weather has started to become nice. We have these very long evenings because we're on the sort of the western side of the Eastern time zone. So people are out even at this time of year very late. I mean, every night of the week there's some car event going on, and on the weekend there's multiple events. So it's a different kind. It's a slightly different focus on the cult culture, but I think the sheer concentration is probably more so here than maybe in Southern California.
What did you grow up with? What kind of cars were you growing up with as a kid?
Well, I actually grew up. My father had a used car dealership, so I got exposed at a very young age to a real cross section of 50s, 60s, and 70s. British and some foreign cars, European cars. Which. Some were adorable and some had a lot to be desired. But my dad wasn't passionate about cars. That was his business.
That was business.
That was business. But I got to, oh my gosh, if he got a car I really liked, or my mom had a car I really liked. I remember one time she had a little 280 SL Mercedes, and I adored that car. And he sold it, and I was just mortified. And he tried to explain to me, we don't sell the cars. I'm in the business of selling cars, not keeping them.
Don't get attached to the metal.
That's exactly it. So I got exposed to sort of a real cross section, but motorsports in England is one of the top sports. I mean, you're exposed to motorsports as a front page, not a sports page sort of activity. So I got exposed to motorsports at a very early age. I got exposed to just cars and had a passion. But I think from probably my early teens, or maybe even before that, actually hot rods and custom cars was something I focused on. I can remember getting, monthly issues of the British Custom Car magazine. We would occasionally go up to, there was an event up in London, in the area called Chelsea, called the King's Road, and they would have a cruise up there. And we'd all jump in somebody's car and sort of go up there. And we had some friends that had some American cars, whether they were Trans Am or Mach 1 Mustangs, and then some of my other friends.
That must have been a heck of a sight in even, I guess, what was that, early 80s?
Yes. Yeah, okay. Actually probably late 70s.
Late 70s? Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a rarity to see out there. Even today, you're kind of hot shit if you've got a Corvette in London right now.
If you got, and back in those days, I mean, American cars definitely stand out. One, their size on most English roads. Secondly, the price of gasoline and filling up the tank, and their consumption abilities to drain your wallet was another one. But so that's sort of the whole world of custom cars was certainly an early favorite of mine. But then I was also into racing, because we live very close to one of the major racetracks in England, Brands Hatch. So,
Oh, wow.
We'd go out there for, I think early passion, motorcycles were sort of an early appeal. Maybe that's because we all pretended we were riding our bikes around the neighborhood trying to be, one of the famous bike riders. But most things that had a motor on it, whether it was cars, bikes, go-karts, big trucks, anything like that.
Were you racing? Were you finding ways to get on track yourself?
No, I wasn't. I was just, sort of passionate about cars, but never really had that sort of call to go racing. A very good friend of mine, in fact, a neighbor, he was very competitive in kart racing. In fact, at one time he was in the British junior team that would race internationally. But every weekend, we were at a kart track somewhere, and he would go racing. But I gave it a try a couple of times. But and that's one, actually probably the last time I was actually on track at Laguna Seca in something competitively was in a shifter kart.
Oh, wow.
So I got an early passion for that. But I never sort of took to the track in anger.
No, I mean, to this day, I still find myself kind of convincing car enthusiasts to go out to the track, and a lot of people, it's just not what they want, or the vehicles they own aren't. They look at them and they go, "Look, just trust me, this isn't making it around the around the racetrack." No,
or it's his ride home, and he doesn't want such chance his luck.
We find that a lot. I'm telling you, man, it's funny because I think a lot of people really, you find out who people really are. And I don't mean that as a driver. I mean that like emotionally. Like I know that people will say, oh no, I can't do that, because it's like they're going to find out that they're actually very aggressive drivers who are willing to put it all on the line. They don't want to know that about themselves. Well, what about your ownership history? You did a stint with Barrett Jackson as well. So you've seen your way around the market. You know what's out there. So you know what you like, you know what you don't like. You know what's up and coming and affordable and what's out of reach already. Do you have a collection yourself?
No, I don't. I've sort of, had a few here and there. But I suppose I've always been, sort of been able to sort of fulfill that through either places I worked at. Obviously with Barrett Jackson, for about 4 years I worked with Craig. We had, cars all the time we were taking somewhere. Probably the best experience I had, although I won't say in retrospect, it's also one when I was at the Black Hawk collection, and both times, both in the 90s and before I went to Laguna Seca, that's a place that has quite possibly some of the greatest cars in the world. So, when you're sort of custodian of those cars and you have the ability to drive those cars on a regular basis, they do spoil you, when you're driving sort of, one-off rare cars that you've only ever dreamt about. So I've always, I've always sort of, fulfilled that desire or that sort of passion through, my connections to the companies I've been involved with.
When I talk to younger enthusiasts, so everyone always wants to go backwards, right? Everyone says, oh, cars are too numb, they're too this, they're too that, they're too quiet, they're too, too computerized. And so today's generation, I think it's kind of funny because they'll be talking about how, I want an early 2000s BMW. They want an E46 M3 or an E92 M3. They say, oh, I want that analog experience. And I think that's, I've been fortunate enough to drive a lot of 50s, 60s, 70s, Italian, British, whatever, sports cars. And I think that's always very strange to me when we're describing cars from like 2007 or 8 as, ooh, I wish we had that analog experience. Now, what you're describing with the Black Hawk collection, I mean, these are some really, really wild things from pre-war. This is, 20s, 30s, 40s. Yeah. What really strikes you? What are the cars that really make you say, ooh, I gotta drive that. I don't even want to know what it's worth. Just let me take it down the street. Do you have do you have a memory of a car that really was a bucket list car? Maybe you didn't even know it existed until you saw it for the first time.
We try and think about that as
take your time. Don't worry. I can always splice this down.
There's probably, most of the cars, I will tell you there's some cars that you either always wanted to drive and maybe that particular example just didn't behave or it wasn't running well. And you came away with that. I thought that was going to be my bucket list day. but it turned out it wasn't.
I've got a few of those.
and then the other extreme is I've driven some cars that didn't really sort of catch my attention. I respected them for what they were in the realm of classic cars. But when I drove them, they drove so well, you couldn't help but fall in love with them and then have a continuing passion, for that. So I sort of had it in both extremes. I think I'm just trying to think if there was. I can't think of one car that comes to mind.
You can always change your mind at another date. We won't hold you to it.
Yeah. Oh, I think probably the first time I drove a Duesenberg, and I think it was a supercharged Duesenberg. That was a pretty stellar experience because they can get up and go, for a big car, and I was fortunate. I think the roads we were on were in and around the Black Hawk area in the countryside, and that was a real thrilling experience because it really is an experience. I mean, when maybe the demise of some of the early cars is, I wouldn't say they're challenging to drive, but you have to concentrate. You've got whether they've got multiple controls. Advanced retard, or you've got to keep the fuel pressure up, or maybe you get a really early car and you're using the handbrake to stop. I mean, for some people, they're just intimidating. They look at those and go, wow, I just couldn't do that. And that's why they're focused on. I mean, I was over at the Amelia Island Concourse over the weekend, and somebody joked, said, well, the theft deterrent device for kids is a car with a clutch pedal, because they look down there and go, what do I do with that? So anyway, I back to your original question. So one car that really did make a memorable experience, and I did have to concentrate driving it. I was very fortunate to drive the 1750 Alpha that's known as the Flying Star. An Alfa Romeo. It's finished in white, as I believe all three of the Flying Star cars were. That probably was, but it has a central accelerator pedal, so you really have to concentrate. You can't leave that to sort of memory, because you certainly don't want to stamp on the middle pedal when you think it's the brake. So you do concentrate on that. But that probably, and I actually had my son with me as well, and I think he was 5 or 6 at the time. But that was one of those great experiences. It'd been on display in the museum for a very long time. It was scheduled to go to an event, so we got taken down. It went through, and the safety check and all the fluids, and Classic Car Club of America were doing their annual meet at Black Hawk, and we pulled the car out, and I went, I just got to take this car out. And I wasn't intending to go as long as I did, but once I was out in it, I go, I've just got to keep going in this.
I've had that. You've got to stop and text them and say, I haven't crashed. I've just, I will be back. I promise. I just need a moment.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. I just pulled up a photo of that, because that a lot of these pre-war vehicles, this is a 19, probably a 31, like a 6C 1750 Flying Star.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, this thing is a monster. This is really something.
Yeah.
And this is in a lot of modern car enthusiasts, I think we have a hard time relating to pre-war vehicles. I think you really need to spend time with them. And to be honest, I think people need to experience either a drive or a ride in some of these cars to be able to appreciate them. And I found that with even with some old Ferraris. I mean, everyone can relate to the sound of a V12, but not everybody, when we think of vintage Ferraris, we're thinking of 250 short wheelbases. We're not thinking of, I drove a 330 GT 2+2 the other day. To most people on the road, they just see a big round silver sedan. They don't know it's a Ferrari. They don't know that's what Enzo chose to drive every day. It doesn't look like much, but I think when people drive these cars, even Alphaholics has gone and built some pretty wild, they're the singer of the alpha
Yeah.
world. And until I drove a few alphas, I didn't get it. I didn't understand why people were so, gaga over these cars, that everyone was like, oh, they're unreliable. They never run. Everybody and their father in the countryside has an alpha sitting under, 10 pounds of dirt that's just collecting dust because it didn't run, and they had kids and they gave up. But when you do drive these cars, I think you start to appreciate the vibrations, the sounds, the inputs, the feeling it gives you when you're moving. So that's pretty, you are in a very select few living people who have been able to drive and tell the tale. That's pretty wild. Well, I guess then the next thing is, where do we go from here? I mean, I don't want to ask you to speculate on the market, but we're watching the prices of used cars, whether they're special or not. I mean, you can't even get a Nissan for a reasonable price at this point if it's got a few miles. Everyone's been able to sell their cars for outrageous prices. But when does the bubble burst when it comes to fuel changes? And EVs are going to be slowly. I think we're only at 3% of the market as EV at this point. We'll move forward, but the next 15 to 25 years for somebody like you in the field, where you have M1 Concourse at your fingertips, and it's something that you want to grow and cultivate and make. I think those guys are pretty safe, because they probably see this as both a great retirement opportunity to hang out with their buds and have their hot rods and work on them, but also as a bit of a plan B. Like if suddenly I'm not allowed to drive my car in 20, 30 years, I'll have this track and I'll have a place to keep it, and I don't even have to tow it there. What happens to the average enthusiast as the future looms?
Well, one hopes that gasoline powered cars, as much as from contemporary models, there's obviously going to be a transition, and there has to be, from an environmental point of view. But when you look at sort of classic cars and collector cars, one hopes that the authorities will recognize, the reason to still keep them, quote, on the roads, as long as a higher percentage of cars have become electrified. And that's just going to change the passion, for cars. But, it is concerning when you hear stories that, some regulators are clamping down on, what cars can be converted from a road car to a race car, that potentially gets, the company doing that into trouble because they've broken some regulation that applies for road cars or cars that are going to be used on the public roads, but it's being interpreted because it's going to impact, the people that are going to, the local track, whether it's a drag strip or it's just a sort of a quarter-mile track or eighth-of-mile track. That's where it's concerning, because it is part of the passion. I think the future from a sort of a modern day car point of view, and we'd all be wiser if we could look into the future. People are always going to like competition, always going to like going fast. Whether it's the ultimates, it's the top end of the hypercar world, or it's just your sort of compact sort of sedan or compact car that kids can go in. So what was the hot rod in the 50s is now the sort of the small compact with all the computerized technology and electrification. So I don't think that's going to go away. There's just going to be a generational shift in the types of cars, or hope we still call them cars. I'd hate to think we're going to be calling them mobility devices in the future.
Oh, that's depressing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm sure mobility devices will be these boxes on wheels in the autonomous lane. But I hope we'll always have something. I think that with cars, there's just all generations have a sort of a passion about different eras of cars, and I don't say I don't see that changing, but we also have to make sure that where we can in today's world, that we continue to embrace younger generations to get connected with cars at an early age that starts building that passion. It doesn't just happen. Somehow we've all been connected at some age, whether at an early age or even at a later age. I mean, I've got a couple of friends that it wasn't until they were, in their sort of middle ages that they all of a sudden became passionate about cars and really went crazy and made up for lost time. But it's a passion that has to be sort of be nurtured. So we've got to start making sure that the events that we do or the opportunity for people who enjoy cars, continues. And I'm hoping this is going to be my first time in Michigan in August. I've always been on the Monterey Peninsula for the Pebble Beach Concourse, and when I was at Laguna Seca for the Monterey Historic Races. But it's going to be interesting to experience Woodward Dream Cruise, because that is, the ultimate gathering. You people come from all over the place with all sorts of cars. For what I understand, sort of tens of thousands of cars and hundreds of thousands of people. It's going to be interesting to experience and see what that's like in person.
I think the beauty too of Woodward is that even on any given summer night, a weekend night, you're gonna just see people sitting out on their lawn chairs on the road. And I mean, that you are right that the passion needs to come from somewhere. It needs to be nurtured. And fortunately, there's people out there who are collectors, and they're building incredible collections with outrageous vehicles. But the reality is we need numbers, right? We need that to be democratized. So as much as it's incredible to go to Pebble or to go to Amelia, we do kind of need the average Joe to be out there tinkering and modifying and cultivating and building and keeping people engaged on the streets. I think that is what you see in Detroit, and I think it's going to be a good time to see that side of it.
Yeah, given what we've all been through in the last sort of 12 to 14 months, I truly believe there's just going to be pent up demand for people to want to go out and just start living life again. We missed it for the longest time, and obviously for sort of regions that affected everybody. I know that there's a sort of a small event, well, not a small event, there's an event that happens each Tuesday night around here, and when they started up about 3 weeks ago, whereas from what I understood, they would get maybe 300-400 cars. They got 800 cars, because I think people were just
small event.
Everybody just decided we just got to go out. We just got to, it's time. We've been in this situation where we're all trying to do what we need to do to sort of make the pandemic go away. And now I think generally, hopefully it's all behind us, and now we got to make up for a lost year.
It feels that way. It does feel that way, and I do think people are ready to go and make up for it. So I hope environmentally we can. Unfortunately, it always feels like this us versus them thing. I mean, you don't have to be a. I try to think I'm a global citizen. Yeah, I like to burn fuel, but I also recognize that I have an impact on our planet with my carbon emissions. But at the same time, I'm not, I do my best to keep it reasonable when I'm not trying to be an enthusiast. I would happily drive an electric car day to day if it meant that I could continue driving my high-strung V8s or my Porsche Flat 6 on the weekends, And I hope that we can kind of come to some sort of in-between where the enthusiasts can continue. We don't lose that smell, that sound. Because to me, I grew up in Massachusetts. We didn't even call them car shows. They were cruise nights. You go to the cruise night, and around here, it was very much like Michigan. Everyone has a hot rod. Everyone has a Bel Air or a Corvette or a Chevelle or a Nova. And the smell of those exhausts, that to me today, still, the most nostalgic thing. It's completely toxic. But, you smell that coupled with a cigar, and somehow that brings me back to the age of 10. My 10-year-old sense of smell is cigars and uncatalytically converted fuel. But, it's a tricky one. It's hard because it feels like if you completely push back, you're met with defense. You're met with such hard defense against the emissions. I don't know how to reconcile that. I don't know how to be an environmentally conscious person and also push for what I want as a car enthusiast. It's a tough place to be in.
Well, I mean, I'm of an age where I think that, when we were kids, the smell of Castrol R was just an aroma. I mean, that was just you could bottle that up. I think, one of the things is going to be amiss is the manual shifter. I mean, that's going to be that. When I go to England, most of the cars over there manual. Rental cars, you're invariably going to get a manual box. And the roads also over there. My kids used to joke it was like going to Disneyland, because there's no such thing as a straight road, especially we live in the country. You're always turning, you're always shifting up and down, and I love that. So that's certainly going to be an opportunity. I think as long as we can save the manual gearbox somewhere, just so we can have that shift experience.
Thankfully, of all people, Americans are the reason why Porsche has retained the manual gearbox.
There we go. Yeah.
So I guess we're good for something over here.
Yeah.
We influence the German brand, so that's okay.
Yeah.
I feel good about that. But yeah, I mean, I'm so thrilled that you are an enthusiast with an incredible background in all this, taking over the kind of setting the path for the future of what is not at the moment probably like a household name, M1 Concourse, but the more and more I hear people recognizing this location. And I think it will become a destination for folks to visit either private collections or hopefully to be able to go to certain events when they're open to the public.
Well, I think, one of the things, obviously we're doing everything we can here in our own way to sort of stand out, especially with the events that we have. I mean, we've got our two events, Woodward Dream Show and American Speed Festival. But this year we have the return of what Motor Trend to do with what they call their Roadkill Nights, where they actually close off sections of Woodward Avenue and along with the Dodge brand to do sort of drag racing there. But we're also extremely fortunate this year to be the host venue for an event called Motorbella, which is put on by the Detroit Auto Dealers Association, which is the organization that puts on the Detroit Auto Show this year. And because they had not been able to do an auto show in 2020 and also again in 2021, this is going to be sort of their show for this year. And it's going to bring a lot of awareness to M1. We're very proud to be the host venue. We're going to work closely with the Motorbella group to put on a different experience event. It's going to be an event that allows them to do test drives on part of our track. Our track we can split into two. We call it sort of the North Circuit and the South Circuit. So they're going to use the south part for part of the exhibit space, and then the north part they're going to be able to do driving experiences for the manufacturers, to showcase product with the attendees. So that again is going to give us more awareness. We're certainly put out. But I think also in Detroit, I think we're fortunate, and I've been coming here for a while, visiting whether it's for events or for business. But with what the Henry Ford, as much as the Henry Ford is all about the whole world of innovation, their automotive segments is certainly very focused. Right at the moment, they've got this wonderful exhibit, Driven to Win, which any time I'd come to Detroit, I'd always make a point of stopping by there, and hopefully it gives people a reason when they come to Detroit, or they have reason to come here. They've got the Henry Ford to go and see. They can come and see whatever we've got going on here. I know currently down at the Detroit Institute of Art, they've got a spectacular exhibit down there about the design, car design, and then the events that come here. There's the St. John, Concourse at St. John, or Concourse of America at St. John's that's coming here. The Grand Prix, which features both the IndyCar and IMSA series, and many other events that are in and around. And then, not too far away out in Kalamazoo, which is the other side of the state, the Gilmore Museum, where they have the collection. They've got the Classic Car Club of America Museum. They've got a Cadillac Museum. They've got, a number of museums all within that Gilmore Museum property. So there is plenty to do in this part of the world for car enthusiasts, which gives, people a reason to come here, because they've got multiple reasons. Once they get here, they've got multiple, automotive related things to become involved with.
That's incredible. And I wish you the best of luck in your first season out there. This is exciting. I mean, you've only been there for 3 months, and it seems like you're really dived in head first. So it's exciting to see that. And I hope what goes on with the Woodward show this season is going to just enhance what was already a phenomenal event.
It is. We're looking at what we're looking to do here. We want to complement the Woodward Dream Show. It's very much, that's the legendary event. We're going to put something, because we're right on Woodward Avenue and we're at the Pontiac end. I believe there's 9 cities or communities between Ferndale, where it starts in the south, all the way up to Pontiac, And I think Pontiac was the last city that actually became formally engaged with the Woodward Dream Cruise. And I think before people they'd get to Birmingham or just the sort of the lower part of Bloomfield Hills and would have a tendency to turn around because there wasn't any reason to come all the way up here. And we hope that we now give them a reason to come all the way out to Pontiac, along with the other things that the city of Pontiac are doing. They're really working hard, and they're almost calling it sort of Pontiac Power Week. We've got the Roadkill Nights to kick it off that one weekend. We've got Dream Cruise. We've got our Dream Show. The new Pontiac Transportation Museum, which has moved into what was formerly a school building very close to downtown. So I think we're all collectively working on making sure that Pontiac gets its fair share of awareness and attraction for the car enthusiasts to come up to this part of Woodward Avenue.
That's so exciting. I mean, I'm thrilled for, I guess, normality outside of the pandemic anyway. So I'm itching to get out of the house and go to any car shows I can. But if I make my way out there, I'll definitely come pay you a visit at M1. And it would be great to see what it's become in the past, in the past year with people, because I think people need this more than they've ever needed it.
Excellent. Well, you're more than welcome. Please, if you're anywhere near this part of the world, just let us know. And we look forward to seeing many of your listeners when they come out to Detroit and for Woodward Dream Cruise and stopping off and seeing our Woodward Dream Show.
It's great to talk to you. I know you may not be a household name yet. Maybe you will be at some point, but you're the guy. You're one of those guys that I'd keep my eye on at the show, because I'd realize all the people I know, like all the celebrities, I'd say, oh, they're all going up to that guy. Who's that guy? They all want to talk to you. They know, they got the inside line. So, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate the time. And I don't know what else to say. Best of luck. I can't think of anybody more suited to go and spread this kind of passion in a city like Detroit.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And we've got a great team here, and we've got an exciting year ahead of us, and we're looking forward to it.
So what do you think? Tim McGrane, pretty good guy, right? I definitely got that CEO vibe from him, but I think he opened up. He was willing to talk about his past. He wants to talk about, what he enjoys. And he has a very sophisticated perspective when it comes to vehicles, because having worked with Barrett Jackson, having worked with the Black Hawk Museum, this is a guy who isn't just like, ooh, I really like that new Ferrari. No, this is a guy who understands pre-war era vehicles. And I hope that with his leadership at M1, it not only helps M1 grow, but I hope that it inspires other venues like it to pop up around the country, because I think what we need is a safe this sounds very 2021. We need a safe space for cars, but we do. I feel like every time I have a car meet, especially any kind of impromptu meet, oh, hey, yeah, we're going to have a few guys. We're going to meet in this parking lot. It's like the police show up. It's like we're not organizing a street race. There's like 5 cars and a couple of guys standing around talking about them. Like, it's not the end of the world. There's no trouble. There's no riffraff. Everything's fine. No one's even revving an engine. So I guess maybe the future of this is we're all going to have these little clubhouses, and we're going to have our collections stored there. Sorry, Garage 42. Maybe you need, David, maybe up at Garage 42, it's time to start thinking about building your own racetrack. Well, anyway, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. Now that we can actually meet face-to-face, I know we didn't do a face-to-face with this one, but I mean, I'm vaccinated. My friends are vaccinated. We just went out to California. We're going to be able to do these face-to-face podcasts. I'm so excited about that. Going to have some interesting folks coming on. And, more important than that, we're going to be able to talk about some interesting subject matter. So thank you for listening. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.